It's the third noble truth, and I'm really happy to do it for two reasons. The first one is that the third noble truth is the good news truth. It's cessation of suffering. And the second one is I'm a living example of at least a progressive cessation of suffering. So I will be at some point um, sharing my experience of what I've been going through since I have been attending the temple. And quite frankly, I came here because I was suffering and I was almost about to hit the wall and stressed out and tensed, worried, and all these things due to what I thought at that time to be professional, obligations. But it turns out that the reality is that I was the one making myself suffering. So when I discovered that, I realized that I have to do something. Do you know why when boarding a plane, they always make an announcement? The flight attendants say that in the event of a pressure drop, you have a mask will be deploying and you have to wear your own mask before helping the other. Do you know why? Sorry?
You have to have strength to do it.
Aha. If yourself you're not safe, forget about helping others. So it's when I came to the realization of this simple thing, I realized that I have to do something for myself, hence my attendance to the temple. So let's look at the third noble truth. In your handout, I put two quotes for you. The aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure, but to avoid pain. And I'm lucky that we're all here because it means at least we have access to some glimpse of wisdom since we're around to, I would say, decrease our suffering. And the second quote from Thich Nhat Hanh actually said that people have a hard time letting go their suffering out of a fear of the unknown. They prefer suffering that is familiar. And this is what Barry often refers to being loyal to your suffering. We're so used to doing what we do that we avoid the unknown. I see that you want to jump in. Yes.
No, not me.
Go ahead.
Actually, being loyal to your story, too. The story that you made for yourself your whole life. So you have to break that story.
If we look at the third noble truth, it's the fourth noble truth to begin with are divided into two parts related to dependent origination. You remember that dependent origination says basically that all phenomena arise from causes and conditions, and then all phenomena cease due to causes and conditions. If we look at the fourth noble truth, we may divide them into two pairs. The first pair is suffering and the causes of suffering. And suffering is what? The effect. And what is the cause? The causes of suffering we have seen in the second noble truth. If we look at the second pair, it's a cessation of suffering and the path to cessation. So cessation of suffering is the effect. And what is the cause?
Attachment.
The cause of, this is, attachment is one of the cause of suffering. But if suffering is an effect,
But the Eightfold Path to the cessation of the causes of suffering.
thank you, practice then becomes the cause that will lead to the cessation of suffering. If we don't have this practice, then there is no possibility of cessation. So if you have no cause, there is no possible effect, of course. And you may have a cause, but if you don't have the right conditions, then there won't be any effect either. You have a seed, but if you put it by the sidewalk, it will never grow into a plant. you have to have the right conditions so that your seed can grow into a plant. So you also have for an effect to exist, there must be a cause, therefore. So for cessation of suffering to come, there must be a cause. And the cause is what? The practice, as Martin was saying, it's the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. Then the question is, what does it mean to practice? What is practice? Any insight? What should we be doing when we say we practice? Reading? Okay.
I think doing our own lives.
Doing our own life.
Doing in our own lives.
Okay.
Applying the teachings.
Applying the teachings.
Being mindful,
Being mindful.
if you can, 24 hours.
Okay, so let's come with an example. So let's suppose you're sick. What you have to do? You have to acknowledge first that something is going wrong. The next step is what? You have to go and see a doctor. And let's say the doctor prescribes gives you a prescription. You go, what do you have to say once you get the medicine?
Take it.
You have to take it. Because if you put the prescription in front of you, 3 bow to the Buddha, every morning, at noon, and evening, 3 bow to the Buddha, what will happen? Nothing. So you have to take it. If you don't take it, regardless of what kind of medicine you have in front of you, no possible cure. So let's take another example. Let's say you're frustrated, and one of our Dharma friends shared last week that she's really off when some people at work do not do their share of the work. And let's say you acknowledge that it's a type of suffering, and you decide not to do anything. You sit on it until it fades. So your frustration calms down, and the question is, has it disappeared? No. What happens?
Manifest again.
Exactly.
Right.
It hasn't disappeared because once the condition appears, it will manifest again. So in order for that frustration to go away, what do you have to do?
Understand.
You have to understand it, and then act upon it. So for cessation of suffering to happen, you have basically 2 things to do. The first is to understand the cause, of course. If you don't understand and you don't acknowledge, you're not aware of the cause, this is lost. And the second is to act upon it. You have to do something. If you don't do anything, there is no chance you could end your suffering. So this is the good news in terms of the third noble truth. It's the third noble truth of practice. You have to lead your way to action. If you don't have actions, there is nothing you can expect. So one question we may ask at this point is, why are we coming here? What's the reason why we're coming to this temple? I know. Because I was about to hit the wall. So what about you? Yes?
To help receive guidance on how to do these things.
Okay. To help and seek guidance on how to
To
decrease our suffering. Yes?
I was just going to say that for me, this is part of my practice. It's the awareness, it's the reminders. As someone that's come to this more than once, it's the learnings of what I missed before, the
because we have to make a clear distinction between knowing things, having information
And
about
doing.
things,
Yeah,
and
practice.
practicing it, living by them, and having the wisdom to integrate them into our experience.
Yeah, and if not, the wisdom to admit that you're, at least in this life, you're human and that maybe you need a little bit of a refresher.
That's right. Yeah. And yes.
That being said about the self, about getting rid of the self, how about the things about the self that are good? Do we really want to get rid of those things?
That's interesting
Because
question.
that's sort of where I was a little bit confused, because the parts of the self that cause you suffering and pain and grief, we do need to work on that, but the parts of the self within you that are good, why would we want to abolish that part of the self?
Wonderful.
That's just my,
Nice question. So,
Yeah.
what seems good? The question is, does it also, the good things bring suffering or not?
they shouldn't bring suffering.
They shouldn't, in fact. Let's take the case of, you just got a baby in the family. Everyone is rejoicing. It's joyful to have a baby. If you look on the surface, of course it's really great to have a new baby. But when you think deeply, this baby will bring sadness. Because whether you like it or not, it will end up with death. So what we initially perceive to be a joyful event may end up being sorrow. So the Buddha's teaching is telling us that our suffering basically come from our attachment, our cravings, and attachment to whatever is good or we perceive to be good or bad. Any type of attachment will lead to suffering. John was talking about her, I would say, attachment to chocolate.
Yes.
Let's say
It's a
you,
good one.
which is a good one, okay? You feel
Is it?
good.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
You feel good about it.
Yes.
But let's say you take 20 chocolate bars. Would you still be good?
I love that.
Let's move on to 50.
No, I understand.
And then you realize that, uh-oh,
Not so
what seems exactly not so good. So any form of attachment, whether you perceive it to be good or bad, will sooner or later lead into some form of suffering. And that's why the teachings are always recommending us to go with the middle way. Because anything in excess, whether it's in terms of lack or in plus, will always lead to some form of suffering.
But I think when you mentioned about a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and then the baby bringing suffering through death or whatever, so no attachment. But I can't see that we would stop nurturing a baby. Hello?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, that we would stop nurturing someone, whether it's a child or a friend, or if we were to do that because we're afraid of the attachment and the result of that, then what kind of world would we be living in?
Mm-hmm.
That's just where I'm looking at it and saying, well, if we're looking at all of these things as suffering, we can't forget about nurturing and helping and being there as a community to raise the children and make them better individuals. And if we stop doing all of these things because of the fear of what the attachment does, then what, because without attachment to a child, to help them to become good individuals and then what, that's the part that I'm
Not
just kind
clear
of
about.
saying, okay, do we stop caring? Do we stop because of the fear of what they're going to bring to us?
Any comment?
So,
John?
I hear and understand what you're saying. I too remember going through this very thought process. But if you review the first chapter again, the first noble truth, and read it a few times, and then as we progress to each one of the truths and then the last truth, you'll begin to see that even what you call the good stuff, yeah, because it will end. And what is at the intention or the base of the good stuff? Is it ego? Is it an intention that you want to feel good because somebody thanks you for doing something? Or is it at a deeper, subtle level that you just do it seamlessly without any attachment because of a huge amount of love and compassion to get nothing in return? Nothing. It's like the wonderful love that we have for our children. That's seamless. As mothers, we just will always love them. Even those two boys, those brothers, with the Boston Marathon. You love your kids. And I think that's what I'm trying to get you to think about. And it's hard. So within time, if you keep,
I'll reread.
but it will help you.
Great.